Right, so where we left off, or where I left off last class was a little bit behind this. I kind of jumped ahead while you guys were working towards the end of class. But oh yeah, good call. Yeah, so that was me jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm gonna go back and get you guys kind of up to speed to where I am, because in your scenes you guys will definitely be you guys will definitely need to use some sort of lighting or something, probably to recreate what your example is going to be. So let me pull up my reference image, because reference is key in everything. Oh, fireworks. No, we're not. It just, for whatever reason, this is what PNGs open up in, and I double-clicked accidentally. You can change it, but what I've found is that change reverts itself when the computer turns off. So, because these computers more or less like reset themselves, so that way people can't trash the default settings. So with that closed, to change it, you can go, if you right-click, at least this is like a Windows thing on Mac, it's a different story, but if you right-click and you go to Open With, and you can choose Default Program, and in my case, I want to use Windows Photo Viewer. If that's not on the list for you, you can click Browse and then pray that you find it. But it should be on the list, so I'm just going to click OK, and that was a lot easier to open. So this is my reference. I'm just going to do the Marvel Studios logo, and so this is a kind of a relatively shiny, reflective metal, but it is relatively rough. And what I mean by that is it's not like a chrome or a mirrored-like reflection. It's a very like almost brushed, kind of rough kind of metal, and this is probably actually a more common type of metal to recreate than something that is perfectly reflective, because almost nothing would be perfectly reflective. I guess if you turn into someone who animates mirrors, you might work with perfectly reflective things, but chances are if you're in 3D, you will need to learn how to make materials that are more like this. So I'm going to show this and then more of a kind of concrete material, because I know some of you guys have a concrete looking material. So I'm going to walk through how I did this. So jumping into Cinema 4D, we can make a new material, and we're going to call this Marvel Metal Material. So the keys for this is like just like a blank material that you guys are used to seeing, and if I just select the material that I have, we notice a kind of different set of check marks. We're not using the color channel. We're purely using the reflectance, and then with a little bit of a bump map. So if I just kind of open this up on my other screen, so we can uncheck color, and this is just kind of one of those things that you'll pick up on and learn as you learn a little bit more about CG. Oftentimes metal-like materials, you don't have a color because it's just the reflection of an object. If you think of like a chrome bumper on a car or whatever, that's not like a painted like with paint. That's the metal itself. It doesn't have like a white or a black paint on it, unless it's car paint itself. But I'm just mean in the case of like a chrome bumper, that is only made of a reflection. So our material will kind of replicate that. So we played with the specular channel a little bit in the desk assignment, and I know some of you guys got ahead into making some materials, but to go back over that, we will click Add Layer, and in this case we will use a Beckman, which is just kind of a Cinema 4D thing. So now this looks like a very mirror-like metal ball. So there's a couple settings that we want to change kind of right off the bat. And that is we want to raise our roughness value. And the roughness value is the key to how I was describing that the material looks not like mirror-like. It's kind of more broad. The reflections aren't super crisp and clear. You don't see any like perfect shapes in this reflection. So roughness will, if we raise up our roughness to something kind of high, you'll see that this changed. This little open window. If I make this bigger, so that you guys in the back can see it, as we change our roughness value, you will see that this goes from looking mirror-like to not mirror-like. And so a value not too high, maybe like 20 or 25, and in my case will get the job done. And actually the reflection itself, the reflection strength, probably won't be as high, because you'll see it once I start adding lights and stuff. It's going to look a lot brighter if you leave it at 100%. It's not going to look kind of as, this is more of like a medium gray tone, maybe like a 50 or 60% gray. It's not like a very bright, like a pure white. So if you raise, in my case, if I lower the reflection strength, the shiny parts won't look like pure white, super bright. So with just the roughness and the reflection strength adjusted a little bit, I can move to a bump, the bump map, and in the bump map, we don't have to add a whole lot. In this case, I won't be using an image texture. I'm not going to download something off of textures.com or whatever. I'm going to use the built-in tools that Cinema 4D has, and there's actually a lot. You can replicate a ton of stuff like wood grain and even concrete, and some more advanced stuff like sculpting materials like clay and that sort of thing. You can replicate a lot of those effects just using the tools that are in here. And so I'm just going to use a noise, and you will see, I can't make this any bigger, but this is kind of like a white and black kind of blurry, kind of blobby mess, and you can see that it is like really greatly affected what my ball looks like here. So I'm gonna actually I'm gonna shrink this down, because most metals in this case that are more of a rough looking metal, they aren't perfectly smooth either. If you've ever felt like brushed metal, like on the bottom of like a pan or something, if you've ever seen a pan that it looks like it's got kind of rings on it, if you feel that, you can feel kind of a grit to it. In replicating these sort of details that I'm describing is what really makes good 3D look like good 3D. And so knowing that, all right, if I want to make a metal looking material that isn't perfectly mirror-like, it's not a highly polished mirror, then it's going to be a little rough, and it's going to feel a little rough if you were to feel it kind of like if it was a real surface. So I'm actually gonna just kind of shrink down the scale, and you'll see, oops, you'll see that this looks a lot different now. Actually, if I kind of just play with this, you'll see that those blobby effects kind of go from being kind of blobby. If I increase the scale, it looks less blobby and more kind of maybe creature-like or like a liquid maybe, like mercury or something cool. But if I lower it, you'll see that it looks a little bit more like a grit. And then if I just go back, I can lower a strength of 20. In my case, is probably too much, so I'm gonna lower this down to something maybe like 2. And we can see that now this looks a bit more of a rough. It's not a perfectly smooth kind of material. And so with that applied, if I jump into my camera and I just click render, oops, I don't have any lights. So if I turn on my light, and my light is just kind of behind the camera, just pointing directly at the object. If I now you can kind of see a little bit of highlight. If I click render, now you can start to see that this, obviously I have to add more lights and stuff to it, but it's not a perfectly reflective. It's no longer like a mirror or chrome. It's a rougher looking material. And if I add more lights to the scene, and if I add one kind of above, just aim this down. And again, I'm using my hotkey. I'm holding Control when I drag one of these arrows to duplicate my lights. So I'm gonna, oops, add one above and one below. And these lights, the strength on them isn't all the way up. I've actually lowered the intensity of my lights down just a little bit, maybe to half power, because again, I'm not trying to make anything too bright. Most of these reflections aren't super bright. None of them are like a pure 100% white. They're still relatively mid-range in kind of how bright they are. So I don't want my lights to be too bright. So if I render again, we can kind of see how this is coming along with the addition of a couple lights. Because I've got a bevel on my scene, or a fillet cap on my extrude, we can see that we're starting to get a couple little highlights that point along, just along the sides of the letters, and kind of like that corner up there. That's a nice kind of highlight, and the stuff on the sides and around here. Most of you guys will probably also run into a situation where you will want to do multiple lights with a fillet cap on your text, because bevels and fillet caps like that adds a good amount of detail to your scene. If I just if I turn my fillet cap off, actually if I render this to the picture viewer, we can use our A and B. So if we just go back and forth on these, you can see that adding that fillet cap adds a good amount of detail along the sides and the tops and the bottoms of our words. It's still kind of grainy, and that's something that we can kind of improve a bit. So in our reflectance, on this channel, towards the bottom, now this is something that it's kind of hard to explain, so I would just take a note. is if your material looks blurry, there's a setting that you want to increase a little bit, not too much, but it's called sampling subdivisions, towards the bottom down here. Now the default value of this is 4, which is pretty good in most cases, but I know in my case it's not quite good enough. Because if I render this, this kind of looks a little grainy, not exactly the way that I want it to look. So if I try to change this maybe to 6, and we can re-render this, we can see that it helps smooth it out a little bit more. Now you don't want to change, you don't want to change this value too much. I wouldn't probably go past 7 or 8, because it doesn't work exactly the way that you would think. It's actually a logarithmic value if you are familiar with math terms. Going from a value of 4 to 5 isn't, it's actually a lot bigger of a change than you think. It's actually 10 times more than you would think. Just by going up one value, you're actually making the computer work 10 times as hard every one value you go up. So I wouldn't change it too much. Again, stick somewhere between 4 and 8 if you do end up changing that value. But I know in my case, a value of 6 will get me pretty good. So if I don't have my link anymore, but my reference video, I should say, and that would be a good thing if you guys are recreating a show title, for example. I'll actually show you. I'll show you how to download your video as reference, because it's important to have that file on hand. So if I go to Marvel title intro, so if this loads, now I'm not going to try to recreate all this, because this is actually a ton of work that would be done by a whole team of artists, but I just want to replicate this bit at the end here, where it goes from a metallic looking logo, and it kind of zooms out a little bit, and then it goes to a flat white, just almost like a paper, or even it could be a Photoshop file. This is what I want to recreate. So if I search YouTube to MP4, now I can actually download. I can download this video, so that way I can keep it on my computer, so that way I can just replay, and I can freeze frame my video, so that way I can take screenshots like I took for these, because this is how I took these screenshots. So if I copy and paste my link into this website, it'll give me a chance to download. Pop-ups on another screen. So it's downloading my movie file. And I found this website just by searching YouTube to MP4. So now if I go to my downloads, I know that I've got this file, so I can just copy this, and I'm going to put this in my folder actually. Just rename it video reference. So this way, you guys will be able to screenshot or freeze frame. Man, oh man. you guys will be able to freeze frame your reference, and I would definitely recommend doing that if you guys are replicating maybe some sporting logo or a sports team or a movie, or whatever the case may be. Again, reference is key, so have your reference handy with you. And now that's basically that's the basics for making the material, my metal material that I need in my case. From here, it's just a matter of positioning lights and animating the camera, and then going into After Effects and adding those finishing touches and stuff. So my scene's relatively straightforward. I am now gonna show you guys a material that's probably more useful to more of you guys, more of a concrete kind of looking material. If I reference the Gotham intro, that I know some of you guys are going to be trying to recreate this. This is a kind of a concrete, but it's also kind of reflective. This is a pretty interesting material, so we'll walk through how to recreate this. So if we go back to Chrome, nope, and so this is kind of a cement or a concrete texture. So you guys can jump onto textures.com and start looking through those categories if that's the material you're trying to recreate. But I'm just going to stick to Google Images because I'm bad. Concrete texture. So I'm just going to Google search concrete texture. I'm going to set my size to large. And I'm just going to try to find something that is in the same ballpark. To take screenshots on PC, I know it's pretty easy to do on Mac, but on PC there's a tool called Snipping Tool. If you just hit the Windows key, you can type Snipping Tool, and this is your screenshot kind of button. So you can click New, and I'm just gonna screenshot just this Gotham, so this way I can zoom in, because I really want to zoom in on on what this material looks like, because I want to get a better view. So I'm just going to name this Gotham texture ref. So I'm really zooming in on this to get a better view. I'm going to kind of just keep this underneath my Google Images and just try to look for something that feels similar. This looks pretty close. I won't try to take too long, but in your guys' case, the texture is going to be a pretty important thing. Because this text doesn't have a whole lot of animation, or there's nothing like fancy going on with the text. It's just well laid out. It's a good font. It fits the feeling of the show and all that. It's really appropriate, and the material, the texture that's on it is kind of what's doing most of the heavy lifting. Because it doesn't like fly in or animate some wild, like crazy way like a Transformers movie or anything like that. It's really kind of a more subdued intro sequence. So the texture is really going to be where you want to give your text character with the image that you grab. So I kind of like this one. That looks very concrete-y. So I'm gonna save this to my folder. I'm gonna save it to a new folder called textures, concrete. Alright, so we're gonna get that out of the way, close all this out. Alright, so I'm just gonna make a new, just gonna make a new scene real quick, and real quickly kind of replicate this Gotham. Does anyone doing this know what font they used? Catalina? Thank you. Is that Catalina with a C?
C, yeah. Or
Calistro, sorry. Okay, so, alright, here we are. So we'll just, we'll space this out a bit, because, not that far. Because in our reference, we can see that these letters are relatively kerned, somewhat far apart. So that looks pretty close. So I'm just gonna make a camera real fast. Just get into my camera. I'm gonna make sure my camera is looking straight on. In my case, at least by just entering 0 in all the different rotation values. And I'm just gonna kind of zoom in on this. Give my text a small fillet cap. It's hard to tell what kind of shape this is, but I'm gonna guess that it's a relatively round cap. So I'm gonna add in a few steps to my text, and I can see this by going to the line mode. I can see that now. I've got some divisions there, so I'm just going to lower this radius just a little bit because it looks pretty narrow in the reference image. It's not a very huge kind of rounding on the corner, but just a little bit there. You know, again, those details are what really sell pieces like this. So that looks pretty good. All right, so let's start with our material. And unlike my Marvel material, because that was purely a metal-like texture, we will be using the color in this case because concrete, you know, a concrete material has you know, has some color variation to it. It's got you know, all these lights and dark spots and splotches, and there's little rocks and all kinds of stuff in here. So we want to use our color channel. So we're just going to drag that into the texture slot on our color. Sure. So now that put our concrete texture on this, and this is somewhat reflective, actually. At least the text in this Gotham intro. This has a little bit of reflectivity to it. I can just kind of tell from seeing a lot of stuff like this, and the clues are on the underside of this G, right, kind of where my mouse cursor is. There should be some little bit of geometry there, but it's in shadow, because you can see it kind of falls off. Kind of right where my mouse is, you can see it. It falls into shadow. So clues like that, and there's like shadowing in the corners of the M and up in this A. Stuff like that gives me a clue that the light is overhead. It's up kind of above my scene. So I know that I'm going to need at least a light up above, and because that light is up above, it's making my materials reflect, or it's making these letters reflect in a certain way. So that's how I know that there's a little bit of reflectivity to it. And like I said last class, your eye, even though you guys are starting out, your eye is a lot further ahead than your hand or your skill might be in recreating stuff. So if you really just kind of slow down and take your time and look at something and examine it, and really try to find the clues in it, you can spot stuff, and you'll know what to do to recreate an image. Even though you might not look at this and right off the bat you might not be able to tell where the lights should be placed, or even that there are lights, but if you look for shadows and you look at the details and stuff, that information jumps out, even if you're still beginning. So in our reflectance channel, to give this a little bit of reflection, we will add in our Beckman reflectance layer. And obviously this just made it look like a chrome ball, because this layer has 100% strength, which we don't necessarily want. So we're going to pull this down. We're going to pull down this layer 1, and I'm going to rename this reflection, just so that I remember what it is. I'm going to take this reflection layer and just kind of pull this down a bit, so that it looks, the preview looks less like a mirrored or a shiny ball and more like shiny concrete, because we don't want the reflection to completely overpower our concrete material. We want to still be able to see that. So we'll just close this up, and let's add that light that we noticed earlier. So we'll just add an area light, and I'm going to reposition it, kind of move it up above. Now I know it's not directly above the text, just by having a kind of a trained eye. So in this case, I'm going to put the light out a little bit in front of, still above, but it's above and in front of the object. It's not just directly overhead, like a light on a ceiling would be, or whatever. So with that light kind of up there, I'm going to make sure that I've got my area shadows turned on my light. Okay, that's good. And then I'm just going to guess, and I'm going to assume that for most of you guys will want a second light, one that just is kind of behind your camera, that still just shines kind of in the direction of of your words, because you want the front of all these letters to be lit up. We want to be able to read this, so we need to aim a light at kind of the front of our objects. So let's just jump into our camera and render it one time, and too bright, too much light. Everything. Should apply the material and then render. Silly me. So this is kind of there, not quite. Obviously my concrete texture isn't going to be a perfect match like theirs, unless I spend a lot of time looking around and working in Photoshop and maybe creating my own texture. But just as a quick demo here, I know that I can get a little bit closer. So I'm gonna rename this overhead light. And in this case, with working with multiple lights, it's definitely going to be useful to name your lights so that you're organized. Front light. I'm going to kind of lower the brightness of these a little bit, so that looks a little bit darker and a little bit closer to the source. And I know that now this is something that you can do in Photoshop or in After Effects. You can kind of change this. You can color correct this object or this render once we're done, because I feel like there's a little bit of yellows and some oranges. There's a little bit warmer of a feeling to this light. It's not just like pure bright white lights. So I'm actually going to change the color on my lights a little bit. I'm going to make them just ever so slightly yellow, not like pure yellow or gold looking, but just a little bit of something. And I might need to raise the reflection a little bit more on my material to give it to something to reflect. Just going to increase the size of my lights a little bit. And again, this is just kind of a guessing game. You'll probably have to take a couple tries at repositioning stuff to get it to look the way that you want it to. There we go. That's getting a little bit closer. There we go. Now we're starting to get some shadowing under the letters of the G and the M and the A and stuff. And we're still getting our little highlights due to our fillet cap along the fronts of some of our letters. So now that's starting to take shape a little bit. And what I ended up doing was actually I made my overhead light actually a good bit smaller than I had first made it. It's actually pretty small now at this point, and that's getting pretty close now. It's getting pretty close in terms of replicating the shadowing and stuff, but overall it's a little darker, which is something that we can actually fix in After Effects. It's easier to use like a hue and saturation or a levels or a curves adjustment layer. It's easier to use those tools in a more familiar setting in color correction and post production than just fighting and sitting there all day trying to replicate every little detail right out of Cinema 4D, because that's part of the goal in this lesson is learning that you don't need to do 100% of the work right in your render. Like in the desk scene, we did 100% was all just Cinema 4D, but in this case we want to learn that necessarily what you make in Cinema doesn't have to be everything or the only thing that you use. You've got other tools. Your tool set as an artist is a lot more than just one hammer or whatever. If Cinema 4D is a hammer, then After Effects can be the screwdriver, and Photoshop is a wrench or whatever. You've got lots of stuff at your disposal, and you don't have to do everything in one program. So I think that's a good place to stop. We're gonna real quickly go over animation, and then just outputting and just a little bit of After Effects in the next class. This will give you guys kind of plenty to work on and get up to speed. So yeah.